Alexis. Hello, everyone. I see there's some folks already here, I believe. So welcome in. Feel free to say
Welcome.
hello in the chat. I'm really excited to be here. It's been a really busy day. Alexis, how are you doing?
I am doing good. The energy today has been extraordinarily odd.
Mhm.
I have to say that I've been like weirdly anxious, and I like don't usually get anxious anymore. But this today, the whole day today, I've just been
Mhm.
feeling really anxious and off, and like also really in tune, like sensitive.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on, but that's what I'm feeling right now. How about
Yeah.
you?
I feel I've been really, really busy. Today is my daughter's fifth birthday. So I feel like it was a big one. And it was just visitations in this reality as well as just a lot going on.
Mhm.
But energetically, just thinking of the astrology, I'm pretty sure today the moon reached her waxing gibbous phase in Taurus, and I'm pretty sure like she's making also a lot of connections with other planets, being Pluto and also Uranus, soon to be Uranus. I think Uranus is actually Friday, and then there was another planet. I think Mars and Venus. Yeah, so there's like all the fixed energy is they're all communicating via the moon. And so the fixed energy that I'm referring to is like the Taurus, the Aquarius, the Scorpio, and the Leo. So all of that energy is pretty active right now if you have any placements in those signs. And I think also when you were just sharing how you were feeling, I thought about tomorrow being 12/12. And I know some people
Mm. Mhm.
also just tap in and connect to that energy as well, just the numerology. Um, and also Mercury is soon to end its retrograde cycle. And also, of course, we have a Gemini full moon coming through soon. And so there's a lot of energy in the air. I feel like a lot of electricity, and
Yeah.
also, yeah, it just seems right on point. And, for those of you listening, Alexis and I have been communicating off and on today, and it has been a very like typical Mercury retrograde.
Yep.
Just my experiences with social media has been hard to like send messages and communicate. Also, I had made an order for my daughter to get balloons, and the order said it went through, but it never went through. And I was waiting like 2 hours, like, okay, like I want to go pick them up. And I called them and they were like, yeah, no, it never went through. Sometimes that happens. And I was like, well, all right. Mercury, this is such a typical, we said it before, this is such a stereotypical Mercury retrograde. I'm
Yeah.
curious if you all have been feeling that. Alexis, I know you've been feeling.
I have. I've been having the technical difficulties with my cell phone every single day, like with connection and everything. It's so funny you mentioned ordering something today because I ordered something today. And when I was ordering it, the way that it was set up was like I attached two things to be ordered, but the one didn't show up. So I attached another one. And then when I got it, there were three three of the things because the one doubled. And it was just like really odd. They're just like very odd things.
Yeah.
My credit card or my debit card didn't like function. I have like money in my account and everything. It like got denied yesterday, and I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Nothing is working.
Yeah. I can totally sense that. Like I'm thinking because with Mercury Sagittarius, I wouldn't necessarily point to that to being a typical Mercury retrograde. I would think more so, like the air signs or something of that nature. But then when I think about it more deeply in this specific Mercury retrograde cycle, Jupiter is in Gemini. And so, as I mentioned in my cosmic climates, is that Mercury and both are retrograde actually. So Mercury's retrograde, of course, and then Jupiter's retrograde. So they're
Mm-hmm.
in each other's home, right? And they're trying to communicate and help one another out. Like, hey, this is what's going on in your space. We need this. And then with Mercury in Sagittarius, it's like, hey, Jupiter, this is what's going on in your space. And like, we need the
Mm.
support in this way, but they're retrograde. So they're probably trying to connect
Yes.
telepathically, inwardly. And it's just not, the wires aren't connecting. It's not,
It's
doing the
so
thing. And
weird.
it's such a big reflection in our lives. And so I'm really curious. I don't think it's just Alexis and I've
No,
witnessed. people online having issues as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I would love to know if you all have been experiencing this too. So feel free to leave it in the comments if you're watching or listening to the replay. And, if you're here, definitely let us know.
It's interesting that um, what I forgot to mention too was on the first day when Mercury went into retrograde, I got sick. Like it was
Yeah.
like in the afternoon, I just started feeling really, really sick, and I'm only now at the end of it and like recovering and
Mm-hmm.
almost back to normal. Like my throat's still kind of scratchy. I
Yeah.
cough here and there, but like I think by the time it goes direct again, I'll be totally normal, which is just so weird. And I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And my daughter, I think she got sick right around Mercury retrograde too, or maybe right before.
A lot of people
And
have gotten sick.
she just, and like, she's in preschool and everything. So she's literally been like sick every month. There's a different cold. And finally, it was literally yesterday because she had so much energy. And I was like, wow, I don't even remember you just being like a regular, normal, like not sick child. It's like I got to experience that yesterday. But yeah, so she's finally having this period of just being like healed and feeling like normal. So I'm hoping that's like, as Mercury is stationing direct, ending its retrograde cycle, I hope that we're going to get more, like, we're just going to feel like energized and feel clear. Like, I'm
I
hoping
think so.
it'll be like that for some of us, for
I
all of
really
us.
feel I really feel that coming through, like especially with the full moon on its way almost here. It's like that about to release feeling. It's just
Mm-hmm.
exasperated by
Yeah.
the retrogrades. It's just I think once it goes direct, things are just gonna start
Yeah.
flowing nicely again. I am feeling very creative though. I have to say
Yeah.
that the last two
Mm-hmm.
weeks that the Mercury has been in retrograde, my creativity has been spiking as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely feel that too. And I've noticed with myself, with you, with my child, that I feel this particular wave of like sickness has been more of like a clearing, like a purging,
Yeah.
where it's like we're all getting some sort of download or something's happening. It's like where our body is purging whatever was like toxic in the system. So a lot of the times when we're, just my perspective, I think when we're experiencing sickness, it's like those things have probably been in us, or whatever's coming through is bringing it up to the surface to like be processed and released in so many
Mm-hmm.
ways, whether it's like, through sinus issues, through other ways, that I'm not going to get into the details, but
Yeah,
yeah,
we don't
it's
need.
it's coming up to be released. And with that, like with my child, and I know this is, I've definitely read about this with being a thing with younger children, where like sometimes it seems like they're even like regressing, but a lot of the times when they're kind of in that space that seems like regression, they're actually about to go through a major like developmental shift, and like kind of like, yeah, like personal development and growth. And I've
Mm-hmm.
literally noticed that with her. So I was like, okay, like I see, and I can see that happening for us as we're older. It might be more subtle, especially if you're not really paying attention to your body, your emotions, and things of that nature. But like a lot of the times when you're having those really challenging like moments, but you're present with them and you just like let them move through you, after that comes this like really big like leveling up or some sort of like evolutionary jump in personal development and growth. So
Oh,
I'm feeling
absolutely.
into that. Yeah, I see that happening. And yeah, so we have Jen here. Jen is
Hey,
showing up in the
Jen.
chat. Hi, Jen. Thanks for being here. Jen says, this has been a mellow retrograde for me, though health challenges have come up and facing major surgery. Yeah, this is,
Mm,
we said everyone's been going through it, and wishing you all the best for the surgery. We're sending you all
yes.
the love and light and good vibes for that, and support and whatever you
Quick
need.
healing.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
And yeah, there are people here. So definitely feel free, no pressure, but share in the chat. So tonight we're going to be talking about visitation dreams, specifically souls beyond the veil. So, deceased folks, people that you love that have crossed over, that have transitioned. Also, animal companions is something that I've been experiencing recently, from what I perceive. And so we're going to talk about that tonight. So, Alexis, do you want to just start us off with defining, what the visitation dreams are per se for those of you?
Sure. So first I'll go off of just the basic Google, ask. Visitation dreams are vivid, realistic dreams where a person interacts with or sees a deceased loved one. Um, there is a difference in the way that these types of dream people come through, and I'm going to reference the Field Guide to Lucid Dreaming with this because one of the chapters talks about natives, and one of the natives that I feel relates most with visitation dreams from a deceased or loved one is the guide awareness, so level high. This type of native seems to know much more than you do. They usually appear with some important information to communicate to help guide you through the landscape of the dream world or give you much needed advice about your waking world problems. These natives will have a quality about them that seems uniquely their own. Their presence is quite powerful. Often the dream itself will be stable and sharp when you are around them, as if your own focus and consciousness is somehow affected by theirs. And I think that's a really great way to describe how it feels to have a visitation from
Yeah.
a deceased person or a loved one is there's a stronger essence. It doesn't feel like yourself. It doesn't feel like it belongs in your head. Like, the other natives may be created by your brain in the dream space, but the visitations are a completely different feeling. They're outside of yourself and
Mm-hmm.
just very impactful. And it's almost like you just know. You just know if you've had
Yeah, you do.
visitation dream from someone who has passed through the veil, you know what the feeling is, and it's kind of difficult to describe. Aside from like you can see them completely clear, you can smell them, you can feel their essence. You know them. There's a familiarity to them that it's not just conjured up in your head. So that's where I would say, or what I would say visitation dreams are, and how the deceased loved one shows up when you have them.
Yeah. And so there was an article that Alexis shared with me. There were two articles. There was a part one and a part two, on psychologytoday.com. I'll actually, after this, I will put it in the description of this video. But it's titled Visitation Dreams. There's part one, as I said, part two, Dreams of the Bereaved. And I noted, just he had studied and researched and just took note of the common um, feeling or occurrences or indicators of someone, like a visitation from a deceased person in your dream. And so there were a few common themes that were mentioned in reference to this type of dream. And so they said the dreamer would often receive a rationale from the deceased as to why he or she is alive again. So basically, when they show up in the dream, there is a moment, and I've experienced this myself, with my grandmother showing up, and also a few other people that I know have transitioned, where I'm immediately caught off guard because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
wait, no, you're dead. Like, what are you doing here? And that would happen primarily. That was the most common occurrence when my grandmother would show up in my dream. But before I started doing dream work and was, accepting and welcoming of her presence in my dream space. And it never got to the point where she would explain to me, why she's alive, so to speak, because I would just wake myself up. But that seems to be a common occurrence, with visitation dreams from deceased. And so another common occurrence is that the deceased may also deliver words of comfort to the dreamer, such as, I'm happy, I'm okay, I'm at peace. They also may look younger or healthier. They might, usually they can tend to show up how you best remember them in waking life. And personally, I can attest to that as well. Like, I've never had a dream, and I'm going to knock on wood because I really don't want this dream, but I haven't ever seen, I haven't had a dream, of my grandmother at the end of life, like
Mhm.
where it was like, because I was there through that whole process pretty much.
Yeah.
So yes, she tends to always look, in the way in which she did when, we were very close and good and happy. And so then they say the deceased may indicate that he needs help crossing over, or may request a ritual to be performed on his behalf. And then the last one here is that the deceased may be separated physically from the dreamer by a wall or a fence, or may appear ill or needing help. And that one I've kind of experienced, I would say, like one of the most recent dreams with my grandmother there, when I've mentioned this on one of the podcast episodes, how when I was sitting in the front yard with my daughter and we were just doing like drawing on the sidewalk with chalk, and I heard, someone coming out of my neighbor's house. It wasn't my neighbor. And I looked, it was my grandmother. And while there was like no fence there, there seemed to be like some sort of separation and distance, even though there wasn't necessarily like a wall or a fence. And it's not hard to explain. That's pretty much it. But I felt like that separation, um, and the way that my neighbor's house is built, like she has a stone little wall up her stairs, and it's not on the side closest to us, but that in itself in the dream felt like some sort of barrier, even though it wasn't like physically in between us. So when I saw that point, I was like, oh, that's really interesting.
That is really
So
interesting. I
yeah.
completely get like that. I've only had one dream where that barrier was up, and the barrier were people. So I was like in this like college uh type of speakeasy bar lounge, and my grandfather had shown up in this bar between like 10 people like from me, and it was crowded in there. Um and he was a giant pig, and I just knew it was him. I know it's so silly, but look, the way things show up in your dreams is so interesting. But I knew it was him, like the energy, it was him. And this was the first dream I had after he had passed away, and he kind of sent like comfort telepathically rather than
Mm-hmm.
verbally, and just kind of was jolly. And I remember I had the blockade of people, but I was lucid and I was able to not, I didn't walk over there, but I zoomed in.
Mm-hmm.
Like he became closer to me, and that was it. But like, it's so interesting to have that barrier. I don't have it all the time. And a lot of what they describe in these articles don't really add up too much to my experiences personally. But that barrier showing up in that visitation dream is so interesting. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. So Jace is here. Hi,
Hey,
Jace. Thanks for
Jace.
being here. Jay says one guy I worked with retired and then passed away a couple years after he retired. I had two dreams really close after his death. The first one, I accused him of faking his death. The second dream, I attended his funeral and I informed him I knew he had passed. He was in the house he owned, but he had sold it well before he passed. He acted like he was unaware he passed. I then led him to a door and he left. Hmm.
Oh,
Oh, I
so
think
that
you
was,
shared this. Yeah, I think Jason, I think you shared this with me before, where it was like almost like you were escorting him to, where he needed to go next. One of
yeah, it's
those.
like without him asking you to help him through that bridge, or through that door into the like wherever he needs to go.
Yeah.
You guys just, you knew it was like telepathic, and you did it. That's really interesting. How did you feel when you woke up from that particular dream.
Yeah, how did you feel? And he's agreeing, yeah,
Yep.
that was because I remember he shared this with me like months ago. Yeah, I've had dreams about other, not even necessarily people that I've known that have passed, that have transitioned, because this is actually bringing to memory an experience, but it was one of those dream experiences that I have every so often where I wake up in my room, but I'm like in the in between.
Yep.
And in this particular case, like it goes from like a dream, it almost goes from like a lucid dream, although I'm like, I don't have like the lucidity and the awareness is really quick. And then I'm like quickly into this in between space.
Mm-hmm.
And when this happened, I was in my room and there were like what would be like ghosts or like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, souls there. And it was, they were pretty old, I would say, probably like early 1900s type garbs
Mm-hmm.
and like clothing. And I remember I was, and I also, this was the same night I had a dream about, or it was a visitation of one of my childhood friends' sons who had passed like early, and it was very soon around that time. And so he had showed up in my dream like before, and that was when I was kind of lucid. And then I was inserted into this experience and I was just pissed. I was like, I'm not a medium, like, you know, because I felt like there was a part of me that felt like I needed to like direct them, or I'm like, why are you here? Like, it was like, I felt that they were present on this land, not necessarily in this house, but something like with, so I'll give just briefly my perspective on ghosts, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
especially in particular places. And I've gotten this perspective I've learned from Dolores Cannon. She mentioned this in her studies, and it was something that just like it just resonated. I was like, oh, that makes sense. And basically she described ghosts to be like echoes of like an experience or an event like where there was like strong emotion, and
Mm-hmm.
that it's not necessarily like where they like died, so to speak, but if it's somewhere that they frequented, like they had a strong emotional connection to the space, or it could be a place where they died traumatically.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're seeing is usually like an echo of their existence or whatever happened there. Like it's like an apparition, it's a hologram or whatever you want to call it. And so that's how I always kind of perceive it. And so that's kind of what I felt about these ghosts, you know, that were in like these spirits that were in this space. And I'm like, I'm not a medium. I was like, I just didn't want to deal with it. But it like this whole like chat about what Jay shared as far as opening the door and leading them out, and even mentioning in this article about sometimes you need to like help them cross over, like that was
Mm-hmm.
an experience. And I've had that experience in, you know, working in places that have had ghosts. Like when I worked in Denver, there was a ghost that was just like, it just hung out, and like that to me felt more than an echo, because there was so much, there was a lot of movement, and I felt a lot of emotion being in that space. And I knew like the energy was like stuck there in a way, but like willingly. It was weird. So a part of me was like, can I like help you like go where you need to go? But then it didn't feel that way. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting to, I've never had that experience in dreams. So that's really, I don't, yeah, that would just be really interesting to experience. Although I don't want to experience that in dreams because I don't want to
I've
do
never
that.
experienced that either. It's so interesting
But
because
it's curious.
it's curious. It really is. And like when I read those articles, I can see where these things would come up as being consistent. But when I have these experiences most of the time, the deceased person is simply just spending time with me,
Mm-hmm.
like hanging out or like doing something that they, I don't know. Like I've had dreams where they are actually giving me a message. Like the one dream I had, my grandmother and I were standing in like a white void space, and she was like pulled out a pillow. It was a white pillow, and it had cross netting crochet layered on top of like two pieces layered on top of each other and kind of like off. centered. And
Mm-hmm.
she said to me, I gave this to my mother for Christmas, and something along the lines of like she didn't like it, or she rejected it, or she rejected me, something along the lines of that, expressing rejection from her mother. And then she said, don't do the same thing I did.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was like a message from my grandmother saying that she made mistakes with her mother and their relationship, and not to make the
Mm-hmm.
same mistakes as her. And that was a really powerful dream, because it was totally out of nowhere. It was
Yeah.
100% her, from the way she smelled to the way she acted to the voice, and like her presence. It felt like really important that she makes sure that whatever this message was, I understood and took with me.
Yeah.
But there's other instances where I'm, with the one I shared recently, where I was having a dream. I was in a lucid dream, and then the dream kind of separated a little bit, and it felt like an in between space. It didn't feel like the lucid dream, it felt something else. And it was the walkway from my grandparents' living room to my grandfather's room. And he was just kind of like going through his things. And I walked in, and I knew immediately it was him. It was, again, like the scent, the aura, the energy, like it's very indicative of that person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I had asked him, because I was lucid, I had asked him about his birth time, because I wanted to learn more about him and his birth chart. And he kind of got off subject and was like, oh yes, I used to dabble in astrology. I followed this astrologer along the lines of like Miss Catherine, which I find just very an interesting fact, or a piece of knowledge that he shared. And then like shortly I woke up, but
Mm-hmm.
it was us hanging out and me kind of asking for guidance, but he seemed like he would, like, it seems like he's happy in an in between space. That's what I
Yeah.
like get from that.
Yeah, and it's so I'm curious for those of you listening, if you have, of course, if you've had visitations from, loved ones beyond the veil, and or, anyone that you've known from beyond the veil, or maybe not have known, like I just shared in my experience. And I'm curious if you have had a conversation with them, because like with these common, indications of visitations, there, and what I've read. So I can share also a few that I went to Reddit, or I Googled, and of course, Reddit's going to pop up. And so I was curious. I was like, oh, let me see what's going on Reddit with this topic. And a lot of people, it's kind of, a one, maybe 2 or 3 time visit. And a lot of the times it's, within a year or so after they have passed, that they come, and it is that kind of check-in, like, hey, I'm good, or maybe there is like a very short message. However, I'm curious if you all have had like a sit down, or not sit down, but like a conversation. And I think there is a little bit of a difference between, visitations from people who have, your loved ones that have passed on, that have transitioned,
Mm-hmm.
and the loved ones that have transitioned, but are like your spirit guides. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
with like the dreams that Alexis and I share, and there are a lot of similarities in how our loved ones show up, like specific ones. And in our case, it is our grandparents. They really kind of hold, like there's like more of a purpose, like an ongoing purpose of their
Yeah.
visitation. And I haven't personally gotten to the point where I have been able to have a conversation, so to speak, with my grandmother, because it's always like, speaking of that feeling in dreams, it's always alarming for me. Even when I was like getting comfortable with seeing her and I was excited, it was always like, oh, grandma's here, right? And if I'm lucid, it's like, all right, like, what am I, like, I had a plan when I was lucid, and it usually wasn't like I'm going to talk to her. Or I think before I did ask her some things. and she didn't really talk. It was weird. Um, and not saying that your grandfather talked, but there didn't seem like there wasn't anything like telepathically, like things changed
Yep.
in the dream. And I would have to go back to that dream, but nonetheless, like I haven't really been super engaging with her because it's always like very heavy, and it's
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm still processing um as far as the nature of that relationship. And so I'm curious if you all have experienced this and you have had, those sit down conversations or just had an exchange in a way. Um, Maybe it was ongoing or maybe not, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of what I experience with that is like telepathic communication when they're in my
Yeah. Yeah.
um and sometimes I don't get the message. Like I'll wake up before I get the message, or like it'll like start to kind of womp womp out, and like the words don't become English anymore. They don't become understandable, and I don't get the message that I'm supposed to, and then I wake up.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting because it's always a guess, like are they going to come back and try again, or is this over?
Hmm. So Jay says that his sister taught him how to lucid dream from beyond the veil and in dreams. He said, I did see her before I dreamed, though my interactions were more so in dreams. And then a few of his family has seen her in different states. She was like 10 when he saw her, and then a cousin saw her as a middle-aged woman, and then his mom saw her as a young lady. So that's really interesting how they
Mm,
transition. And I think it's probably, I wonder if it's more so for the comfort of the person and that's very spirit guide like,
it
right?
is,
To
yeah.
show up as like how you perceive them anyways, but then also just what's comfortable. Like they kind of meet
Mm-hmm.
you where they are. Like that's happened to me with like spirit guides, aside from, like my grandmother or anything like that. Like they have transition, like they have evolved in form and how I perceive them, where sometimes it's like an actual visual like of a person or a figure, and then it has changed to just like light or like a feeling. And so I
Yeah.
think that's really interesting, that, when you see them at different stages of their lives. So that makes sense. And I do feel Jace, I mean, I don't know now, I'm sure, I think it's been a while since you have seen her in your dreams, but she definitely was like a guide, like a spirit
Mm-hmm.
guide for you at that young age. So it's really interesting, especially and that's the same theme of like the ongoing visitations as
Yep.
well. So I want to read just a few from Reddit
Okay.
just to see what's that's coming through. Um, so this person, the name of this Reddit is grief support, or that's the name of the subreddit, I guess. And then this particular post is did loved ones visiting in dreams, question mark, any thoughts? Um, does anyone else, basically, that's kind of like, I guess, a subtitle. So sorry if this makes absolutely no sense, but does anybody have any thoughts about dead loved ones visiting us in our dreams? I understand that it may be due to grieving them that they then show up in our dreams, but it somehow always feels really real. I lost both my parents, and for the first 6 months, I had absolutely no dreams about either of them. I would hear of other people having visits in their dream, or people visit in their dreams, but I never experienced it. Around a month ago, my mom finally visited me in my dreams. I am a very vivid dreamer, and so I often become aware that I am in a dream. I was going I was going about my dream. Then all of a sudden, I was in my mom's bedroom and she was standing there. I remember bursting into tears, taking her hands and saying over and over, "How are you here?" I knew that I was in a dream and that she was dead and not meant to be there, but it truly felt like I was with her. We had a conversation for about 5 minutes before she disappeared. I then kept trying to get her to come back, but she never did. Then I woke up. Anybody else experiencing anything like this? So then just to read like two more. This person said, did I read this one? Sorry. I was extremely close to my granddad. He was my best friend to the point that neighbors called me his shadow when I was a kid. I always knew his death would devastate me and it still does despite him passing over 5 years ago now. Since he passed away, I dreamed of him only once. We were in a boat on a still ocean like glass and watching an incredible sunset, having a good time and saying how beautiful everything is. In the dream, I get my phone out to take a selfie. He's laughing and smiling, but with his half sad, half happy tears in his eyes and says, "Don't worry, the picture won't matter. Trust me." Then I wake up. I haven't dreamed of him since. I would love to see him one more time and for him to visit me more often. I also understand that what maybe that was him giving me some closure and hope that we'll see each other again. What I will say is that for a long time, I didn't believe I dreamed of him, and in a way, I got scared because I never did. I truly believe you will see your mom in dreams, and of course, this is in reference to the person that started the post. I truly believe you will see your mom in dreams or just in day-to-day life manifesting her somehow when you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I think this is one of those things you can't force. Wishing you
Nope.
all the best and hoping you see your mom soon. And yeah, so and it goes, there's more. There's one who her husband passed away and he kind of popped up. So this one's I'll share this one and then this will be the last one. So I did this past weekend. My husband passed a year ago, August 1st, from cancer. And even though I had asked him to send me a sign after he passed, such sign was not forthcoming. However, Saturday morning, I was sleeping and I had a dream that my husband walked up to my side of the bed, only wearing boxers, exclamation point. And I told him to get his junk out of my face and wave my right arm. I then rolled on my back and my husband was floating about a foot over me. He was smiling and very bright, not white like a ghost, but bright like if he was lit from within. There was something white floating around him, white Jesus robe, sheet wings, not sure. Anyway, it wasn't scary, but when I opened my eyes, I was on my back staring at the ceiling. I talked to my aunt about it, and she thinks I dreamt about him because it was so close to his death anniversary and because I was still struggling what to do with his cremated remains. However, I had just decided on what to do with his remains. Most will be in, okay, so she goes into how she's gonna do that. So, but I just think that was interesting, and it did show a lot, like just in these three examples that I read and a few others, it was definitely they don't come often. Like it's like once maybe around the anniversary of their death or like their birthday, they come around. And so, I thought that was just really interesting. And I also felt like their loved ones were definitely coming to help to support and to bring closure. And it felt a bit different from like that spirit guide energy that I was mentioning just,
Mm-hmm.
earlier.
That's a really like all of those stories really interesting. I remember the second one where she talks about being close to her grandfather and how she always knew that his death was going to be difficult. I have experiences like that where like I would lay in bed and have visions of my grandfather like in his casket, like
Mm,
dead, and like would just cry. And I was like
yeah.
a little kid. And then when I didn't go and see my grandfather in the room, like I didn't walk into the room to go up to his casket, but I peeked in. And when I peeked in, it like refreshed that exact
Ugh,
vision
that's
of
crazy.
when I was a kid and I was having this emotional reaction to his death.
Mm,
And even with his like we were it's funny, we were close, but we were also weren't close. It was a very like distant closeness. I don't know how to explain that. And
hmm.
as we got older, like there were like just familial complications and being a teenager and just not spending as much time with my
Yeah.
grandparents. I separated a little bit, but right before he passed away, he showed me in a dream how he was going to pass away. And then
Yeah.
like 5 days later, it happened. And so I feel like that connection with that grandfather probably could lead to being a spirit guide because my grandma has only showed up maybe once or twice in my dreams, but my grandfather shows up pretty frequently.
Yeah.
And
It does.
um in waves. And I read recently in this book, The Alchemy of Your Dreams, they discuss a little bit about how these visitations will occur sometimes when you're in transition in your life. And it can be
Mm-hmm.
like getting married and like exiting this life and entering a new one, or moving, or graduating, or just being in an in-between state in one chapter to the next. These visitations can show up, and I wonder if the more frequent periods are attributed to needing help getting through that transition yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes sense too. And Jace also mentioned, similar to what you were saying, is that they will, show up, they will come to those who need them. And
Yeah.
in those, times that they are needed for that extra support. And that makes sense, as you were mentioning, like if you're going through some major transition in your life, like they will show up to
Mm-hmm.
give you that support. And it's really interesting because I definitely resonate with that. As far as my grandmother's occurrences in my dream, they have been the most like recurring since I've started the dream work, since I've been, in the transition of like just being a mother, and also, this whole metamorphosis of my identity. I felt her the strongest. And I also just know that I've mentioned a lot of times here that I am carrying on something that she didn't complete. And I will also go back to our last episode. I did mention that my mother, I was like, oh, she's very secular. She's not gonna like do the work that she needs to do to like carry it on. But that was inaccurate, because she was doing the work with my grandmother's, you could say, legacy, what she was working on before she transitioned. And it got shut down by my mom's job, the law and accounting firm that she's working for. So she couldn't complete the charity work and the books that she was writing from my grandmother's journal. So she was doing that. And it would make sense that, my grandmother would also come to me, because I can do it in like a different way. So it doesn't have to be, the same way. And I know my mom plans to, once she retires, which is pretty soon, she's going to revisit all of that and kind of pick up where she left off. So that's really interesting, because my mom's going to retire here in the next like couple years. And so my mom and us both, like, putting my grandmother's work and energy out there, it'll be really interesting from like two different like perspectives and realms. So that'll be, I'm really looking forward to that. And I know that we'll both encourage and inspire each other in that regard. So had to go back and pay my mom tribute for like the work and the effort that she has done. But
Mm-hmm.
I've had dreams of other deceased loved ones, and one I'll say that's real super tender to me. And even when she shows up in my dreams, it catches me off guard, because there's just so much grief. And I don't like that whole, like, even if I don't know the person, like I was saying, when I had those spirits in my space, I was just like, no, we're not doing this. My god sister, she had unfortunately transitioned at age, I want to say, I mean, she may have been 20, maybe. And so she was my little sister. Like I've known her since she was a baby. And so when she transitioned, and it was right after my grandmother, like maybe like 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
2 maybe 3 years. So that was a lot. And so she doesn't come to me often. She's probably come in my dreams maybe like 5 times since then. So it's been pretty much almost 20 years there. But whenever she comes, it's always like we're hanging out. And then at some point it's like, oh, wait, no, you're dead. Like, this isn't right. Or yeah. So it's one of those experiences. And then I wake myself up, because there's just so much, like, it's really heavy for me. And so I've never gotten to the point of engaging, but it's like, but we were like, whenever she shows up, it's like, oh, we're having a good time. Cause we used to like dance together, like makeup dances and just do like, she was like my little shadow. And so
Mhm.
that's what we are usually doing when she does visit. So I know that's a thing too. Like most of the time it is, you know, you're hanging out or picking up where you left off or just
Yep.
going back to those times. So
It's really interesting. First, I am again so sorry for this loss. I cannot imagine how painful that was. Even just thinking about the loss of my sister, I can't. So I deeply
mhm.
apologize for that. And I'm so happy that she has visited you because
Yeah.
I feel like it would leave a little bit of an emptiness
Yeah.
if you hadn't had these visitations.
Mhm.
Um, and kind of to go back a little bit, this just occurred to me. And I'm wondering if maybe you and I are both experiencing the visitation of these past loved ones slash spirit guides is because we're both embarking on a new decade
Yeah.
this year, both of us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. And it's like picking up momentum too.
Yes.
So, well, we shall see. That's a hard yes. I felt like my whole
Yeah.
body was like kind of
Yeah.
like lifted up. So I definitely feel that. And there's a lot, especially in the dream realm. I feel people that are really comfortable with their dream space. And I feel that that is more likely to occur, yeah, when you're in these transitions, you know, people that that have transition that are close to you, even if they weren't super close. Because similar, like my grandmother and I were extremely close, but when I was like middle school, we stopped hanging out. Like I would always
Mm-hmm.
be at her house, and like she raised me until I was pretty much like 7. And then once I moved back with my mother, and then I was in middle school, you know, I had my friends, so I didn't care. And even in high school, she ended up moving because she was like pursuing her PhD and all of that. And so she came back, like she moved to Michigan, and then she came back to Maryland when she was sick. And it was like pretty much the end of her life. And I didn't really get to spend that much time with her, even though I lived with her
Mm-hmm.
like the last year of her life. I was very like intentionally not present because I couldn't handle that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was no like open conversation. Like I had no support in that process. And it was just it was a lot. So um yeah, it was like we weren't super close at the end, but our souls were definitely like very, very close.
Yeah.
And being that I'm doing the work that I'm doing, it really makes me easily accessible to her. And now that I'm in the dream space, that's even more accessibility.
Absolutely.
And so I think that like it's interesting, a lot of what I was seeing popping up on Reddit or people that really wanted to make that connection with their loved ones. And I think if you really, you know, are committed to it, like I think they will come, they will show up.
Yeah, I
And
think that if you're open to it and you're not trying to force it, because I
mhm,
feel like an organic, like low expectation. I don't know how to explain it, but like you want them to visit you, but your expectations are not so high that you expect it immediately.
yeah, you're
It
not obsessing
comes
over it.
naturally and more organically, and
Hmm.
it's going to come when you need it. Like I just don't
Yeah,
think you can just make it happen. I mean, even last
yeah.
night I was like trying to induce maybe a visitation, like call upon for a visitation, and my dream was nothing, had nothing to do with anybody who's passed. Like it was like my neighbor, like I was spending time with my neighbors, like, and they're alive. It
Yeah,
was just,
yeah,
it was not, you just can't quite, I just don't think it's as simple as trying to manifest it.
yeah. No, I agree with that because I remember recently I had a dream. My grandmother was in a dream, and it was when I felt that I regressed actually in my grieving process and just in my relationship with her as she had transitioned. Like it was like one of my old dreams. Actually, it was the one where I was like, she was at my neighbor's house, coming out of my neighbor's house. And after that dream, I was like, oh my gosh, like, no, come back. Like, I want to connect with you. And and she did come back. I feel it was probably like a week or so after that, but it wasn't like it wasn't it wasn't what I wanted.
Yeah.
Pretty much. But it's like, yeah, you're right. You can't force it. And I've had other experiences where I'm like, no, I really want to talk to you and, whatever. And it's like, it will happen. And the key is being open to it. And also, if there's something you want to communicate or you want to engage with them, just like, have that intention and focus on it, often, but don't obsess with it, because when you focus on it, it definitely, like when you see them in your dream, your consciousness will come through, your conscious mind will like, oh yeah, I wanted to ask them about this thing,
Mm-hmm.
or I
Yep.
wanted to, hug them or whatever. And so it'll definitely happen. And it's just like, don't give up, but also, don't obsess with it.
Absolutely. Totally off topic for a moment. I was thinking about what you had said. Now, you and I have several synchronicities and parallels in our lives that are like really odd. Um, like really odd. But one of the things that had happened was around the same ages, our grandmothers got very sick and passed away, and it was really traumatizing and had a really deep impact on us. And, I just realized when you were saying your grandmother was like right before she got sick, she was pursuing her PhD. Right
Mhm.
before my grandma got sick, she got her GED.
Wow.
So I don't
Yeah.
know, there's that education, like end of
Yeah.
life education. So it's just so,
Especially
so
as
weird.
an older person, like when you think, especially that generation and being a grandmother, it's like at that point, it's like, I've been married, I've done this, I've done
Yeah.
that. Like, who cares about, getting some sort of degree? And it's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's interesting. So we're gonna add that to the list. We have to have a list of all the
It's so,
synchronicity.
guys, it's so weird.
It's
Like,
a
it's
lot.
inexplainable. I just, whew.
Well, also, so I'll say too, like recently, or speaking of dream incubation, or just asking for, or not asking and not asking.
Mhm.
Last night, one of my best friends, her partner had like reached out to me and just sharing that they had one of their pets had transitioned. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and
Mhm.
their dog was like 17 years old. It lived like a long life,
Wow.
and yeah, and so he was sharing like the burial rites and everything that they did, and I was taken aback, and I wasn't surprised, but I was like, wow, like what a send off for this animal. And I don't know if it was like the way my emotion connected to it, but I like her and her boyfriend, like the dog wasn't really there, but like the energy of that like was all up in my dreams. Like they were in my dream, they were present. I was
Mhm.
like visiting them. And while the dog wasn't there, it was just like the energy, you could feel the essence of it, because I met the dog and
Yes.
everything. And unfortunately, my friend, they had one of their cats transition this year as well. And then another cat that she has just found out it has cancer.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, yeah, there's a lot.
Oh my
And I was
gosh.
like really feeling for them last night. And they were, I don't know what was going on, but they were in my dreams last night. But it was like a really good dream around like the energy, like it wasn't heavy or anything. But yeah, I was just like, oh, that's really interesting. And then a couple days ago, I can't remember the dream, and I can't remember specifically what, like, I don't remember seeing my Siamese cat that transitioned like 2 years ago, or was last year, but he definitely visited me in the dream. And he's visited me before, like and that's how I knew he officially passed, because he was showing up in my dreams a couple times. And when I saw him, because he didn't live here when he passed, he was at my neighbor's, but he did come and pretty much say his goodbyes. And so then maybe a couple months after that, he was in my dreams a few times. And so I would definitely, I know a lot of you listening, I'm sure you also have had like animal companions visit you as well. And they also can be guides or show up in really important moments in your life for that comfort, and especially with animals. Like I feel like that would even be more of a strong comfort and just like soothing type of experience, and like as far as like them showing up. So tender moments.
Yeah, it's definitely when you have a visitation dream, you know it's a visitation. You just know it. There's just something different
Yeah.
about it. And like, there's no way I can convince or prove it to anyone who hasn't experienced what I
Yeah.
experienced. But when you do have it, you know
You know.
immediately.
Yeah, you really do know. And I'm grateful to have the experience, because like I'm gonna ask my brother when I go home for Christmas, because I know my mom dreams about my grandmother often. And I need to start talking to my mom more about her dreams, because every so often, since I've been doing this too, like they come, like she'll share here and there. But like we all have a recurring dream of cars, and like,
Mm-hmm.
just, and my mom has read my grandmother's journal. So she will sometimes drop little nuggets of my grandmother's dreams. And I'm like, and sometimes they're not, my mom is not the best with like her filter, and they're like traumatic things that she'll attempt to share. And I'm like, nope, don't, please don't. Cause
Yeah,
my memory, like it's not gonna go away. I'm not ready
yeah.
for that. But I want to start talking more. But I'm curious, like I'm gonna ask my brother when I go home if he's had dreams of my grandmother. And I want to get deep with him, because my brother, he's very deep, and he's very like, we used to be really close, but just distance and everything. So I want to like really, really connect with him, and I'm gonna get nosy. I'm gonna tell him no. I'm like, I'm gonna share a little bit of this if you haven't, like he's totally open. Um, but yeah, I'm curious, because he is, as far as the grieving with my grandmother, and they were close, not close like how her and I were, but they were close. I'm curious if she's shown up for him. And I like, he's got some big transitions coming up soon, because he's going to be getting married, and I'm sure he's going to be like having children and stuff at some point after that. So, and he just moved in with his fiance, like they just bought a house together. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
let's see if you've had any visitation dreams, not just from my grandmother, but from his other grandparents, maybe. So,
Even just the transition period and how his dreams are affected. Like,
yeah,
even if the visitation's not there, how his dreams have been affected by this huge collection of events that are all kind of occurring.
yeah,
Um, that would be interesting to find out. And I think I'm going to reach out to my sister too and kind of dive a little deeper because my sister
yeah,
also dreams. Like, dreaming runs pretty deeply in my family as well. And her dreams are always very interesting to me.
mm,
And I noticed that we'll have dream parallels, but they'll be completely different.
yeah,
So, like, if we both dream about stairs, my dream of stairs will be like rickety old, like, and hers are going to be like in the air, like several feet apart, floating, separated. It's very interesting.
yeah. Hmm. Awesome. Well, we're going to definitely continue this conversation. Next week, we will be talking
Absolutely.
about dream visitations, but we're going to focus specifically on spirit guides
Mm-hmm.
and maybe other entities, so to speak, like
Yes.
other worldly type beings and energies. I think that'll be fun. And we've shared bits and pieces of these experiences throughout our chats. And so it'll be nice to have it all in one episode, because yeah, we've had some really interesting dreams, and I think I'm definitely more open to those. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll have some nice shares that have happened, and maybe who knows, we might incubate something, we might conjure some sort of dream specific to this.
Oh,
And
I definitely
so,
have some ideas for dream incubation over the next several weeks, but hopefully
yeah,
I get a little bit of something within the next week. But I have ideas for dream
yeah.
incubation.
And we have
The
to
more
like, we're gonna have to do an episode where we like check in on the dream incubations,
dream,
because you
yes,
definitely have
yes,
some
absolutely,
interesting breakthroughs on that, just all across the board. So I'm really excited to have you
absolutely.
share on that. So
Mhm.
um Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else any other points you want to make or anything else you want to touch on
No, I just
regarding
want
this.
to say, if you guys are interested in sharing your dreams with us and you'd like us to do like an open interpretation on the live or even in private, whether it's anonymous or not, please feel free to send us your dreams. You can send it through Instagram at our Instagram, Journey Through the Universe, or you can send it to our email, the podcast at gmail.com. I think that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why I
Yes.
always trip over
I'm
the
like, you're
email.
asking me, I always mess up. I'm like the
But yeah,
Interverse podcast.
podcast.
Yeah. Because I'm like, wait, that's not taken? That email? Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's
yeah,
all
it's so weird. But anyway, send us your dreams for interpretation and for shares. Let us know, how you want it to be shared, whether it be anonymous or not, and if you even want it to be shared or if you want it to be like a private conversation and interpretation. But yeah.
yeah. So yeah, every once a month we're going to have a special episode about like focus on dream sharing. So that's where we're going to share your dreams if you want to share them. And so if there's something that we talked about in this episode, if you want to share a visitation dream, even though we've already talked about it, definitely feel free to email us, or as Alexis mentioned, connect with us on Instagram, and we will share it in this next coming episode. And we will share it around like the new moon of the coming cycle. So it'll be around the end of the year, which the new moon I believe is on December 30th of this year. So that'll be interesting in Capricorn. So around that time is when we're going to share the dream sharing episode. So please feel free to share your dreams about anything, and yeah, let us know if you want us to do it on the podcast, or just interpret it privately through our email.
Oh
So
my God. Real quick. I'm
yeah.
sorry. Is the full moon on the same day as Mercury going direct?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Pay attention to your
And
dreams,
it's in
guys.
Mercury's home, right? So Gemini is the natural home of Mercury, one of Mercury's like homes,
Pay attention
and
to
it's
your
going
dreams.
direct. Pay attention to your dreams. That is just like I love when things like that happen. It's like, what
Oh,
are the odds? Like, and what is, especially this is like such a Mercury retrograde. It's like,
oh, so much.
and Mercury is like making a big statement. It's like, it's my full moon in my home and I'm stationing direct. Like, I'm going to drop some bombs on you
Yes,
guys. Like,
absolutely. Oh,
it's
and
going to be, oh my
take
gosh.
take note on how, tomorrow 12/12, that's kind of like a portal day, right? 12/12.
Yeah.
Pay
Yeah.
attention to how your dream space might be tonight or
Yeah.
tomorrow night, and really like see if maybe there's a theme of portals, or something is revealed that's big. And I don't know.
Yeah, we shall see. We're all in the space of like closing cycles, especially with 12/12. I'm glad that you brought that up, as it's like 12 is that perfect number. It's the
Mm-hmm.
harmony, the balance. It can be, divided in so many ways, and there's this element of perfection. And so I'm just curious, and I know we can share more about this, on our dream sharing
Mm-hmm.
episode, and just how maybe the year of dreams has been for you, and
Yep.
definitely for this inner cycle, like what is coming full circle for you, and is that being reflected in your dream? I think that's something to really contemplate as we move throughout the rest of this month. And also the 12/12 is probably maybe the peak of that, so we'll
Yep.
start to receive those insights, starting with that 12/12. So we'll see.
Oh, I have
It's all fun,
chills.
and this is like, I love playing this way. Like this is the fun part about life and the inner journey through the interverse. This is
Mm-hmm.
the best part of it, just to
The
have fun and
best.
like play. So
Yes.
all right, well, we will see you all next week to talk about visitations again. And yeah, feel free to share in the comments your questions, your experiences, all the things. Thank you for being here. Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Night, everyone. Cool.
Well, that flowed super organically.
That was good.